Jace will be helping with some of our customer stories. I'm gonna talk a little. I'm actually the one up above. That's Michael below. A little automation difficulty. Never mind. Emma and myself. So we've all been working on this program, going through every step of the way with you, and it's really exciting to be able to share today some of the wrap-up pieces that are going to help you measure your success with this program. So, update on where we're at. We're at week 5. So this is all about push the button, sending your first org-wide messaging, and then we're also going to talk a lot today about how to measure impact. So hopefully that's something you're interested in. If not, you know, now's the time to jump out and get some time back. So I wanted to start here because I think this is a really important part of our journey. And in fact, well, I'm just about to launch a poll to ask you guys for some feedback.
Hey, Tim, if you want, I'll send the poll for you.
Oh, perfect. All right. But what I'm trying to get a handle on today is, where are you at? And this isn't about castigating those, or it definitely is about celebrating those that have sent their first message. But really, we want to understand and get a little bit of visibility into where you're at and where we can help if you want to move to the next piece. I assume that everybody's on board here and in the call because they see value in using Company Communicator to communicate and building that out as a channel for your organization's comms. But I understand that there's also things that can pop up, right? So some of the stuff that I've heard just this week includes things like, oh, we couldn't get this past our security organization. Cool. Let me know, put it in chat. We have people who can help have that discussion with security. So it's security with security, not comms or somebody who inherited this and they feel like they're out of their depth having that discussion. Likewise, I have a bunch of organizations that have come to me and said, hey, Tim, like, we're super excited about this. We can see the value, but we just feel a little bit sketchy about like going out to everybody in the organization on our first try. Cool. Let's talk about how we do a POC. Let's talk about how we do IT only messaging, for example, so that we understand and we put the thing into practice with the view of being able to leverage that going forward. So hopefully we're starting to see some results. Just going to pull that up and have a look myself. Slowly, slowly. All right. So, have you sent your first message? Now, just a quick note there, this isn't anonymous. And part of the reason for that not being anonymous, you're like, it's okay, like you don't have to answer the poll, it's completely voluntary. But if you are hitting no, and I got to be honest with you, we need help, then it at least tells us, you know, is there somewhere there that we need to engage with you and help you out? So right now we have seen some people send, so congratulations to the Pantheon of Champions, as it were. But really cool, 36% of respondents, and I've got 33 votes at the moment. So what's that? 35 votes. Wow, it just keeps climbing. But what I'm seeing is about a third of you have something scheduled and ready to go. And then there's 61% who are like, it's not happening right now. Totally understand that. If you do want support from Jace, from myself, from your CSM, just drop it in the chat. What can we do to help you get this done?
And I'd also love to hear if there was just this, if you don't mind, Tim, just for a sec, this was a very new approach that we took this year to help a lot of organizations think just beyond Teams and the apps and really focus on the strategy. And we'll do some more follow-ups on this as we go into the final week next week, and you'll all see we'll keep the community around. We're not just going to be shutting this down immediately, but We'd love to know if this is valuable, and we genuinely want to hear how to improve because we want to repeat and do more of these next year, well, next fiscal for us, which starts in July. And this isn't for us to go give our bosses kudos. This is genuinely trying to understand how do we do better by all of you. So don't need to necessarily put that right now, but if you do have thoughts, we would love to genuinely hear that so we can support you better.
100%, Jace. So maybe now that that poll's up there, you know that if you need help, you know where to get it. Maybe this is the perfect time to segue across into talking about some of the organizations who have been there and done that and then forged on ahead. So in this case, we have a piece this week from a company called Unilever, who I suspect many of you know. They're going to talk about their journey with Company Communicator and how they updated their channel strategy from like a primarily email / intranet based one to a combination of Teams, SPO, and email, depending on what the audience was and what the message was that needed to be communicated. So I'm going to throw across to Jace to talk us through it.
Yeah. So what I might do, Tim, I'm thinking maybe we play it, unless Emma, if you want to share anything, and then what I'll do is what I did yesterday is maybe just a quick summary and recap, if that works.
Love it. All right.
Anything you want to share first, Emma, before we kick through it?
No, I think the video covers it all. I think Anshul is on the call with us today as well, and I just wanted to say again a really huge thank you to the Unilever team for running through us through the what they've been up to with us, because honestly it's outstanding seeing some of the things they're doing with the Teams platform. So without further ado, let's hit the button. Guys, I don't have audio. I don't know whether you guys do.
Yeah, Tim, you sharing it?
Yeah.
Company, and
so let's try. You got it?
It just came on, yeah.
Perfect.
From a comms perspective, I think primarily before Teams and Company Communicator, it was primarily around SharePoint and email, right? These are the two primary modes of communication. But we sort of onboarded onto Teams late 2019, early 2020, and post that, it's been a journey Zoom, right? So pretty much we live in and out of Teams day in, day out, right? And that's where we thought, okay, any new comms or notifications, it's best to nudge people within Teams rather than outside. And that's where we started exploring options, and Company Communicator really fits the bucket out there. And we've just got started with onboarding, and there are a couple of use cases for comms with Company Communicator. Yeah.
So I think additionally, just to add to that, we do have a good presence of Yammer as well. So Yammer is another of those modern collaboration tools that we have a good establishment of, and that only complicates the equation. But in that case, when we saw Company Communicator, we clearly saw this as something having potential that stands apart from our regular communication channels. So not just Teams, not just Yammer, all company posts or something like that. This clearly had the value to be a lot more scalable, targeted, direct. Yeah, I think it just worked from the get-go. We figured out that this was the way we want to go with some of those communications.
I love that. It's really valuable to hear from you guys about the power of Teams to deliver communications, but also in alignment with some of the other tools that you're using today across the M365 platform. So second question. So you obviously saw the value in Company Communicator. Can you tell us a little bit about the scenarios that you're looking to use Company Communicator for within the business?
Okay. Primarily, as we speak, right, we're looking at a couple of use cases. One is sending out comms related to Teams itself. Other one is around the health submission, right? As we are in the pandemic, we do want to keep a tab of how our employees are doing. And it's a global app, but of course, based on the country's legal specifications, it's not onboarded on few of the countries, right? And we do cater to all the GDPR regulations for storing the information. But it's a Power App embedded within Teams. And again, we want to nudge people to really submit their status on a regular basis. So we send out notifications within Teams. And of course, there's a link within the Company Communicator notification where you click and it opens up the Power Apps within Teams. So you're actually not going outside the Teams environment, right? That's the beauty of this.
Exactly.
So, so everything in Teams, you get a nudge, you click on a button, opens the health check app, you fill in the information, and you're done, right? So this is the primary use case that we're currently working on. And again, we want these notifications to be triggered during working hours, right? So, and since we are a global company, it's global time zones. And what we have done is really set up cadence based on the time zones. So we have based on countries, right? And like said earlier, the Company Communicator really helps targeting people. It could be very specific to a particular channel in Teams, or it could be a Office 365 group, or it could be an Azure Active Directory group as well, right? So for health reminders, what we have done is leveraged country-specific Azure Active Directory groups, right? So we have multiple AD groups, and we have multiple messages sent out to different countries at specific time, specific local time.
So I think just to add on, we've taken the plain vanilla. So the Teams version of ours, the Teams tips and tricks version, is the plain vanilla Company Communicator. But then, what we did was we responded to the ask from the global IMT saying that we need to know the health of our employees, and we need to have some data around there wherever legal permits for us to collect health status. We need to know how our employees are doing. And we realized that the plain version of Communicator will not suffice. So we decided, and because it's available for us to customize fully, and that's just the beauty of it, right, Emma? You have the core with you, and you can just add on so many things onto the core and make it even more powerful. So what we did was we responded to that ask from the global medical team, and we said, hey, we have a solution for you here that we could potentially customize and turn around very, very quickly, and then send it out across. In a way, that also helps the case for Communicator, because we now have a reason to deploy it at its full potential ASAP, right? And while some of these other use cases can wait, this also acts as a proof of concept for us. It really shows the business the power of this tool, right? So I think that was really, it's such a great way. It's a great entry point for the application to show its usage and its value. And like Anu said, we've got 80 groups for every country. We schedule messages on cadence, and then they just get delivered automatically to those countries at that specific time. So it just works wonders, yeah.
I really love this because we're talking about two quite distinct scenarios. We've got the the vanilla version of Company Communicator, just like we were talking about in the program, where we're sending out those kind of Teams tips. But then you've also gone that one step further. You've really thought about, how do we want to customize this? How do we make sure that we get the best engagement possible by sending out messages based on Azure groups and where people are sitting in the organization, or where they're sitting in the world? So yeah, I love that. That's it's really interesting to see those kind of two scenarios and how you've really thought that through. So I just want to ask a little bit about how you've made this happen. Obviously, you guys are part of the collaboration team, and you're kind of the product owners for Teams. Are there other stakeholders in the organization that you've had to work with to kind of get this off the ground? Have you had to, work with, security or HR, or are there any kind of stakeholders that you've had to collaborate with?
You want to pick that, Anshul? You've been very close to it.
Sure. So of course, Emma, we've had to take this through the entire security process in Unilever. We've gotten this looked at by security, by privacy, and we've worked with them definitely first. But more importantly, I think we've worked very closely with employee experience. So the EX team in Unilever is responsible to make sure that the nudges we send to our employees are meaningful, are actionable, and they don't overwhelm people particularly, right? So we've had to work very closely with EX to do all of that. And while I was on the program yesterday, one of the biggest questions that kept coming up and up all over again is, how are you governing this? How are you defining who gets access to this and everything? So one of the things that we did quite early on is we created a governance document, right? We sat down with all of our stakeholders and we were like, how many nudges is an author allowed to send per week, for example? Is it 2? Is it 4? Is it not beyond 4? What is that sweet spot? Who are going to be the authors? What is the criteria to onboard the authors? And once you have agreement on all of those early on, right, it just becomes a replicable and repeatable model. So you have a governance that you can have established. And if I create in the future new versions of Communicator, I can apply that exact governance model to all of these different versions of Communicator. So we sat down with all of those stakeholders and we were like, we've gotten the security assess. It's a safe application to use. It can scale. And employee experience sees the value in it. But how do we make sure that it doesn't get too intrusive? It doesn't get to nosy. The right people have the right, basically the right approach or the right authorization to send out those messages, right? So we've agreed all of that in a governance document, and that really, really helped us a lot. So I definitely wanted to mention that it's a great idea to get our stakeholders together. Although we will own this app and collaboration services, we are the people who've owned this as a platform. But there could be many other teams like comms, for example, who'd want to use this in the future to send out leadership messages or notifications or stuff like that, right? Anil, maybe if you can add on to some of the things that we could potentially see.
The moment we really started speaking about Company Communicator, there's been a lot of requests really coming through, right? Like one is comms. The other team is HR, right? For example, if they sort of need to send out some nudges to very specific set of people or people in specific country or even functions, right? So if they want to send out those nudges, it is the easiest and the best way to do.
So it sounds like there's definitely some management internally to make sure that you're not sending tons of those nudges out to your employees. And I love that piece of advice that you've given to really collaborate with multiple different stakeholders, and especially with employee experience, to really think about, okay, what does the employee that is experiencing these nudges, how do they feel about this, and how do we make sure that we maximize engagement with the communications, but we also don't overwhelm those users.
Precisely.
I think a great bit of advice for the community. I love that. So final question for you guys: what does good look like for you? So you have your iterations of the Company Communicator. What does good really look like for you over the next few weeks?
So the next few weeks, definitely now that we would onboard the health check reminders, right, onto Teams, we definitely want to get more and more submissions, right? So that's one of the success criteria. Yeah, that's one of the success criteria. But once that's really kicked off, I'm sure there's going to be more and more requests coming through to collaboration team. And how do we really sustain and manage those new requests coming through is going to be a big challenge. I'm sure it's going to be a big challenge, right? From a success perspective, yeah, how well we can use this, and from a usage, right? How do we really communicate or converse with our end users is what a success would be, right? The moment you send out notifications, few may ignore and few may actually action. The more the actionable items, that's what to me is success. Yeah.
I love that. So it's not just about receiving the nudge and reading what's on that card. It's actually about making sure that you are drawing towards that engagement. So click that button, push that button, get to the Power App, fill out your health check app. It's not just about receiving the message and reading it, but it's actually about engagement with what you're putting out there with your users. I think that's a great again piece of final advice for the community there, that it's not just about sending out a message and being able to decide whether someone's ticked the box and read that message, but actually it's about getting them to engage with the content. Anything final from you guys before we close out the session?
No, I definitely want to thank you, Emma, for bringing us in touch with the community. I think some of the best practices that are mentioned on the broadcast hub call have been so useful for us. And obviously, you played an instrumental role in making sure that some of we had when we deployed 2 versions of the communicator on the same tenant. There is some issue with app IDs that you can't have multiple of those, and I think we were able to get that resolved. So obviously, if you're planning to deploy at scale, if you're planning to deploy multiple versions, there is a little bit of some work needed to be done. One of the advices I'd also want to give is we planned in advance for this by creating distribution groups, because that was our primary mode of targeting people, right? We would get a distribution group per country and then send those messages across. So there is some groundwork that needs to be done there. So I think if you start thinking about what is your primary distribution method going to be, is it just chat? Is it chat to everyone? Is it only specific teams, or is it distribution groups, right? Then I think that is one of the boxes you really need to get ticked quite ahead in the cycle. And that helped us really hit the ground running with the communicator apps. And of course, can't thank you, Jace, and the team enough, because the insights that we've received, and we know that we spoke about how important conversion is, right? But it's a balance, right? If you overwhelm people, they're just going to ignore it or block a bot, for example. So it's important to get conversion, but not at the cost of losing engagement. And I think that's the broadcast hub will really help us absorb those best practices, create those very, I wouldn't say clickbaity, but very interesting messages. So people read them and they're like, oh, dude, I need to check this out. Or this isn't just any other health check information. It's also stuff that I can use. One other thing is that the app just keeps surprising me. Like, for example, yesterday I was on the call and I realized that I could use Markdown and bold stuff and italicize stuff and create lists on Company Communicator. And I was like, this is just wonderful. This opens, a whole new way for us to make this interesting. So yeah, all of that.
Love it.
Awesome. Hey, Tim, I might do, if you're cool with it, just a quick recap. I know we were chatting on the backside, but yeah, the quick speed at the end and a little bit of choppiness. I'm sure some folks want a few things reiterated because it was such a good interview, and we'll share it with folks here. We're not allowed to share it publicly, but the folks at Unilever were kind enough to share it with us here. So thank you again, guys, for setting that up, and Emma, thanks for organizing as well. Look, a couple quick things I wrote down that I just thought were really powerful going through that interview. First one was the background from the beginning was that this wasn't just about Teams. It wasn't just about company communicators. It was the consideration that SharePoint and email had been the primary comms tools for Teams. Now everyone was in Teams and you wanted to reach them inside rather than outside. But also the call out to Yammer. And the fact is, we're not trying to necessarily leave everything behind. It's can we have a better way of bringing it all together and reaching people where they are. I love the business scenarios for the company communicator use, obviously Teams being one, but the more important was around the health of employees at Unilever. So how do we actually point people with the button in the adaptive card to the Health Check Power app to make sure that people are submitting their updates and their status with COVID, which I thought was so incredible. The whole core of what Unilever is trying to achieve is safety of the workforce and health of the workforce. And I think that's such a pure and incredible goal there. And again, it's not just about Teams. This is really about enabling what's ever important to your organization, your strategy. I thought the comms cadence was really important. So one thing that was called out at the very end and then early on was setting up distribution groups before as a part of the governance strategy. And this allowed Unilever to then send out targeted messages to different geos and or different business and organizational groups, which was pretty cool. And if you picked up on it, there was one customization they talked about, and correct me if you guys, if I misunderstood this, but we also have it available in the FAQ. It was the ability to schedule messages. So from what I understood, Unilever is going to send messages to different regions or organizational groups, but in the time zone when they work or during the time when they work. So you could schedule messages for later. So as an example, if I wanted to send something to the folks in Australia, too early right now, most of them are probably sleeping, but if I post date that for about 5 hours here on the Pacific Coast or the West Coast in the US, that'd be in the morning for them, and I could do that. So again, that code is actually sitting in our FAQ document right now. Last thing I'll say that I thought was really powerful was the connection to other stakeholders. And we were really adamant from the beginning as we planned this program is we wanted to bring together the IT department and the corporate comms group, right? Or whatever you call them in your organization. But I love that Unilever brought in employee experience as well as corporate comms and IT together. And it was just you can hear how valuable that was in the strategy, making sure that messages that were sent were meaningful, actionable, they weren't overwhelming. It was on a cadence that made sense. Talking about who the authors were and the governance model that was around it, and just created a great conversation that allowed other groups to get involved, but again, kept users at the center of the entire experience. So again, a couple of things that I took out there. If anybody else wants to throw anything else on that they added, but wanted to summarize because I know it was a little choppy there.
Angel, anything from your side?
I think just one more thing that I mentioned to Emma after the video ended is that definitely give your bot a personality. So we've customized bots to give them very good logos that are instantly recognizable. We've actually given the author apps and the end user apps different logos. And that really helps in giving the bot its own personality. And if you've got multiple instances of the communicator bot, definitely do that, right? Make them stand out, give them names, give it a new description. It shouldn't look like the same thing being redeployed. It should have an identity of its own.
Makes total sense. Thanks for sharing. So I'm going to go back to the share again and jump onto the next piece, which is the main learning from today. And what I wanted to drive here was talk a little bit about measuring impact, because it's one thing to go out there and build our campaign and send it out to a bunch of people. But unless we can tell who's responding to what, we're kind of shooting in the dark. So as a starting point for this, I'm not kind of sure how much you know about SharePoint analytics. If you're a guru already, like pat yourself on the back, go grab a coffee for 5 minutes. For everyone else, buckle up. This is going to be a hell of a ride. So first, a caveat. There are a ton of ways that you could do this. If you have third-party analytics solution that you use on top of SharePoint, for example, or maybe you've built something in-house, awesome. You'll be able to get an even greater level of detail and get more insight into what's valuable to your users. But the idea of the program, the Broadcast Hub program, was to leverage what SharePoint has built in out of the box. So everything else is gravy. But let's start with a little exploration around what kind of analytics you have by default in a modern SharePoint experience. And for that, I'm going to actually use our example. So for those of you who haven't jumped across to SharePoint before, the easiest way to do it, like to get to SharePoint in Teams, is to jump across to the Files tab here. And then you can basically open in SharePoint. I've got it. Thank you. So I can hit open in SharePoint, and what you'll get is a link to the backend SharePoint page. Now, the cool thing about the backend SharePoint page is that it has these built-in analytics. So I can get a little pop-out bar here. And this is the real basic stuff. This gives me my unique users who viewed this page. It gives me my unique views. It gives me my time spent per user. And I also get this traffic over time, which becomes really handy when you're starting to pick out the long tail. That'll become particularly relevant when you start sending out comms that people keep coming back to, because that's a really good, it's a really good indicator to you that, hey, people are finding this content valuable and want to know more about it. So that's the basic site analytics, and we can actually go to another level within that by jumping up here. Settings. If I go to site usage in here, now I get my detailed analytics. Let me blow that up just so that everybody can see. So in here, we get that same stuff that we were looking at the start with our unique viewers, our site visits, our time spent per user, and I can segment it by the last week, the last 30 days, the last 90 days. I also see what the pages are that live under that. So if you're thinking about structuring this information that you're going to send out as part of your Broadcast Hub initiative, maybe you want to structure all those pages in one spot. So you've kind of got a bit of an idea of how this aggregates over time. I can see the number of viewers for particular documents. I can see what platform they're using to access that. And I also get a couple of insights. So it kind of tells me, well, Thursday at 5 p.m. is when most people come to the SharePoint site. I also, and while we're not going to use this for the stuff that we're doing, something that might be handy to know about for later, you can actually see what is shared with external users. So you can imagine how that might be useful for reporting going forward. So that's where we get all the data. Now, the other thing here is what actually gets measured. So bear with me. As you can see on, or as you saw in that Broadcast Hub page that I just showed you, there are like 900 users in our team. But activities that happen in Teams are not one-to-one with activities in SharePoint. So we need to think about what actions actually show up. And the easiest way to think about that is basically if anybody interacts with anything on that Files tab in Teams, that's going to show up as a SharePoint action. So chats, no. Uploading a file in chat, yes. Clicking on a file that somebody else uploaded in chat, yes. All those things are going to show up. So if we're feeling comfortable about what can be measured and where, and let me just check that in chat real quick. Jace, is there anything being called out that I need to?
Actually, I was typing it, but I'm just going to say it out loud. There's been a ton of questions as we've gone through the last 8 or so weeks, so counting the 2 beforehand, around view rates of the actual messages that are sent out. And don't get me wrong, I think that's incredibly important, and we understand the desire to track that. But I think what Tim is showing right now is so important because it's tracking engagement. And it's really seeing how users are leveraging the resources here. And I think correct me if anybody feels differently, especially if you're in the comms department, that's what's really the beauty for all of you is, yes, we want the click rates and we want the view rates, but we really want to engage users. And so this is, again, default analytics that do a lot of that for you, with tons of upside here.
Perfect. Thanks, Jace. So we've got the data. What now? Well, I'm pleased to say we've got something here that's going to make life a whole lot easier for you on that front too. So, introducing your graduation template. So to help you with measuring your success and sharing it with the stakeholders in your organization, we've put together a template where you can capture that critical info. And because I'm a big believer in eating my own dog food, I went ahead and actually pre-filled one for you. So if you're sending out the Better Meetings campaign, you're in luck. I've already filled it out, and that should make it even easier for you. For everyone else, this took me an espresso and about 2 hours to put this together. So I would advise you to do this in a session with your Modern Work CSM, because particularly for the next steps, they'll be able to advise you on what Microsoft is running in terms of programs or early access to products that'll help reinforce and build on the momentum you're creating here. So once again, let me kill the presentation and we'll jump into this template. So first up, this is the base one. And again, replace your company logo, add in the people who did the good work, and move right along. We put together an executive summary. You can steal the short blurb from the one that I've pre-filled, that kind of gives an outline of what the program is. And if you have anything to add about what you're trying to achieve, you're welcome to do that. This is the page that you'll want to replicate 5 or 6 times, however many messages you send out. And what you're going to have is basically take a screenshot of the message that you sent. You're going to talk about what it is that you sent out, and then what's the why behind doing it. Then you can drop in some of those top line stats that we saw earlier. So page traffic by time, or unique users, or maybe you're going to talk about the long tail, whatever it is. I trust you as marketing professionals to jump in there and get to what the core insight is that you want to draw out of this. And from there, you can start to talk about next steps. After that, there's a little bit of a summary page at the end, and this is what it looks like when it's filled out. So again, you have access to this. There is an AKA short link which will come up, and it's already posted in chat for you. But here's one that we built, right? So each of those, I just hyperlink the headings. And I also sort of called out what's the one takeaway I'd want my exec to have from this. And you can see here for the meeting polls campaign, the what was educating the users on how to set up and launch a poll before or during a meeting, because we know that getting feedback creates an interactive and inclusive environment. So we sent it to 9,000 users, 2,000 of them clicked through to the SharePoint site. The average time on page was 6 minutes. Great. Okay, and that was measured for the 7 days after the message was sent. So that actually gives you a really nice cadence. If you're sending out your messaging once a week, then basically when you're ready to send out your next message, that's the time to do the analytics piece for the previous week. And then I drafted up some next steps. So maybe you've got an analytics team internally. Cool. Let's see if we can see if there's a spike in forms usage, which we can pull out of the MS Graph product, and actually prove, hey, look, now people are doing this more often. We could also consider what the next educational step for them is. From these 2,480 unique viewers that went to our campaign page, maybe we need to have, on the next time we do it, click through to good poll questions to ask in a meeting. So you can see I dummied these up for the campaigns that we've done internally, and the stuff that we've presented to you. And then I've thought about what it is that could be the next steps for you. So I'm a big fan of a postmortem, just to have a look at what worked and what didn't. The reality for organizations that deploy Company Communicator is that as soon as that first campaign goes out, people across the organization start to understand the power of this tool, right? And they all want access. So that's why I've got this piece in here around what happens next, because you need to have a really good strategy about integrating this into your comms and channel strategy. And you also want to make this sustainable. So what do you expect from people who go, oh, I want access to this? Okay, cool. What kind of training do I want to put them through? What kind of restrictions do I want to put on their usage? What kind of best practices are we going to share internally? And then it's rinse and repeat. Now, we've given you 3 campaigns, so you can absolutely run one of those other campaigns, or maybe it's now time to branch out into something that you guys really want to focus on because that's a core priority for your organization. So, questions about that overview? Beyond, hey, where is it? And I'll just share again. These are the AKA links. Oh,
I'll post those in the chat too while we're doing it right now.
Yeah, cool. One hot tip. So one of the things that is being built in that nobody knows, and maybe Jay stops recording this bit, but one of the things that's being built in is that during a presentation, you're going to see clickable links popping up fairly shortly. So you'll be able to present like this, and you guys will just be able to click on the screen and bam, that'll take you to where you need to go instead of having to type URLs in. Anyway, it's in the pipeline, not too far away.
I'm going to leave it. We'll get in trouble, whatever.
Yeah. What are they going to do? Fine me? All right. So week 5, call to action, push the button. You've hopefully seen how all of this comes together. Now you know where you can go to measure your success. You've seen the examples around how Microsoft tracks success for programs like these, and you know where to get your templates. If you need help to unblock your organization, ask us, either here in chat or directly via your CSM. Hopefully you're starting to see the power of Company Communicator and its ability to reach users where they work. Next week is the final session, and we'll be diving deep into where next once you've completed your first campaign. Everything I've presented today, as well as the recording, will all be shared after the session. So if you missed links, or if I spoke too fast, or you just don't understand the crazy Australian accent, or you want to go back over something, it's all there for you. And with that, I want to leave you again with the call to action. Let's make great things. Push the button. Thank you.